Hello. Hello. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I pressed this and it said goodbye on the screen. And I got scared. Yeah. Sorry. What's your name? I didn't check the pairing.
It's Wojtek. Wojtek, it's Polish name.
Wojtek, Polish name. Cool.
I don't know, I think I destroyed the...
Oh,
I don't know what happened.
I'm telling you, this is so scary.
That's right. Okay, well, it should be.
Okay. And what's your rating?
I'm 23, I'm International Master, 2300.
You're a 2300 International Master. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. It was at this point that I realized that I was facing an extremely strong player, and I was terrified. To give a little bit of context, I was playing a chess tournament in a bar in Paris, and because there was prize money involved, we weren't really allowed to talk, so we really had to focus during the games. The time control was 5+2, and I knew that this would be a very tough game, but I was ready to give it my all and play the best game of my life. He started the clock and I went 1d4, my favorite move. He replied d5 and I went for the Queen's Gambit. Now he actually captured my pawn and went for a Queen's Gambit accepted, which I don't really face that much, even though it's become a lot more popular now. So I simply developed my pieces. Knight c3 is actually a little bit of a inaccuracy. I don't think I should play Knight c3 because it allows black to get a lot of tempos with b5. So my bishop went back and then he developed his bishop. And here, everything that I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to get the center. So I'm trying right now just to, as much as possible, be able to go e4 pretty soon. The problem is that if I go e4, he's going to have b4. So I castled instead. He developed his knight, and I started to prepare the move e4. So I went queen e2. c5. He's right now saying, if you go e4, then I will capture your d4 pawn. So he's trying to explode the center, open up the center. And I started thinking here, what do? I ended up moving my rook to defend the pawn. And he went queen c7, just because he doesn't want to have the queen on the same file as the rook. Now I started thinking here, is this the moment for me to go e4? Should I start pushing my pawn now? Or should I develop my bishop, or should I do something on the queen side? But no, I went e4. I felt like this was the moment. I felt confident in my position, and I thought that the opening had turned out pretty great. So we exchanged a couple pawns, and he needed to find a way to castle pretty soon. Now, what I wanted to do was that I wanted to go e5, but I can't go e5 right now because the knight and the queen are both defending that square. So he developed his bishop, getting ready for castles, and I was thinking, how can I try to go e5? Or where should I go with the bishop, which is the other question. My dark squared bishop does need to find a good square. The question is, where do I go with it? Because if I go bishop e3, then maybe he will be able to go b4 and kick away my knight, and then my e4 pawn might be undefended. So I needed to think about all of these things, but I ended up going for that move. Well, I actually regretted my decision. So this was probably the thought process that I was having right at that moment, but I was gonna go bishop e3, and then I ended up going bishop e3. I said, you know what? Whatever. Now I did my very much thinking pose, which means I am super focused. I do not realize what's going on in the background. I am fully in with the game. He put his rook on c8, looking pretty confident, like this was a position that he's had a million times, and he rerouted his queen to b8, which is a pretty common way of playing this. It looks a little bit weird to have the queen on b8, but sometimes the queen can even go to a8, and that queen together with the bishop can become strong in the diagonal. Hence why I went f3 to really try to close down that diagonal. I don't really want to go e5 because it's just going to be too difficult to do that. So he castled, and here I had to come up with a plan because we finally entered the middle game. We've both castled, we've both developed. It's time to find a plan. I tried to reroute my knight to a5 and did so by going knight b3 because I thought that those dark squares could become pretty strong. Or my control of those dark squares on a7, b6 could become pretty strong. So I was trying to take control over that, and I was also trying to prevent him from going knight c5, which would be a very strong knight. So instead he moved his rook. I went queen f2. This was to have my queen and my bishops create a sort of battery that would be controlling that whole diagonal. And I was once again just trying to prevent him from going knight c5, which I thought was the place where the knight wanted to go to. You can see now how good it is that I have a pawn on f3 preventing his knight from going knight g4. So my pawns on e4 and f3 are actually very strong right now. And I was here feeling like the position must be completely equal. I don't think I was at this point really realizing that I am playing against an international master now. I was just thinking about the game. Because he couldn't go knight c5, he ended up going knight e5 instead. I obviously want to keep the bishop, so I went bishop e2, and we traded a pair of rooks. Now he wanted to trade even more, and so I realized that we're probably going to get into an endgame. But I was feeling pretty confident about that because I had a lot of pieces on the queen side, which I realized was going to be the part of the game where there was going to be the most amount of play. So I went bishop b6 to force him to trade rooks, as if he moves anywhere else, I will be the one in control of that file. And now I took with the knight to be able to move my knight up to e3, but also more importantly, if I took with the bishop, he would have had knight c4, and that knight would have threatened both my bishop on b6, but also the pawn on b2, and I need to make sure that I keep my bishop pair because my bishop pair is very strong. So I don't want to trade any bishop for any knight at this point in time. He threatened my bishop. And I started thinking about where should I take it. Do I go bishop a7 threatening the queen? Do I go bishop e3, but then maybe he'll have knight c4 threatening my bishop, and maybe that will force me to take it? Do I go bishop d4? Maybe I want to place a knight there at some point. I needed to a little bit think about where do I want to place my pieces. I ended up going bishop e3. The idea of this was that I wanted to have the opportunity of going bishop f4 and pinning that knight. At this point, he had a full minute more than me, so I started to feel the pressure of the clock. He went queen d6, centralizing the queen, now that the queen on b8 wasn't doing much. And I felt like my pieces were a little bit in a weird position. My knight on d1 is kind of passive. My bishop on e2 doesn't really do much right now, apart from preventing black's knight from coming in. And I just needed to somehow find a way of getting my pieces together. I moved up my knight. The idea of this was just that I didn't like that the queen was kind of threatening the knight in case I would ever move the bishop. Now he advanced with the knight, and I just got really scared and decided to take it because I felt like that knight was very strong, and that bishop was, even though I wanted to keep the bishop here, that bishop was my bad bishop, as all my pawns are in light squares, so my pawns were blocking that bishop from moving. So it wasn't really a terrible trade for me. This knight got centralized, defending the queen. And I needed to make the decision, do I take the queen and allow his knight to come in and attack my pawn on b2? Or do I come up with my own counterattacks? My clock was ticking, it kept going down, and I just started to feel the pressure of that. So I went knight a5, threatening the bishop, asking where's it gonna go? And bishop c8, and now finally I decided to trade, as now my b pawn could be pushed because of the fact that my knight had moved. But I needed to make the decision, do I really want to go b3 or do I want to move back my knight? I ended up moving back my knight because I thought if I go b3, I realized at this moment that he had bishop b4, winning a piece. So I had to go knight d1. This was very important, and this was something that I had missed. But I thought that as long as that black bishop is passive on c8, we are fine. But he went e5 to open up the diagonal for the bishop. I started bringing in my king, which is the most important piece in the endgame. Very important to bring in the king, as otherwise you're playing the piece last pretty much. But I only had 14 seconds here. I was looking calm, but I was not calm inside. He threatened my pawn on h2. I decided to allow him to take it, as if he takes it, well, right now I'm threatening his knight, but two, I might be able to have b3 sometimes, locking that bishop in. He moved this knight. I attacked it again. And I was feeling very uncomfortable with how his pieces were kind of all surrounding me. That bishop being able to go to c4. I mean, he had the bishop here. He had a very strong knight. So I was definitely feeling here the pressure, especially with 4 seconds on the clock. I moved up my knight because I was trying to find that d5 square in the center. Here he was really trying to come up with a plan. I mean, you can see how much he was focusing and how much he was trying to come up with something to do, but he couldn't quite find it. He ended up pushing the pawn to be able to bring up his king and also have a few extra squares for that bishop. I attacked his knight. Now his time was getting very low too. This was a bullet game at this point. We had extremely little time. He went knight a1. I thought, can I trap that knight? I threatened his bishop. Bishop c4. Now I was threatening the other bishop. I was really just trying to attack that a6 pawn. That was everything that I wanted. He checked me. Has to move the bishop. I brought up my other knight. All of a sudden, I was the one in control of the position. I felt like he had to move the bishop again. Knight d8. I was just trying to find a better square for the knight. I went knight c6. And now I checked him. I was just trying somehow to make those pawns weak. I went bishop b6. Here I was just trying to make moves really quickly. These were not the best moves. I should probably have gone knight a7 earlier and try to really put pressure on that pawn. But he also made a few mistakes here. We both were very low on time. Knight c3. Now I'm really putting pressure on that pawn, and I'm basically winning that pawn. So in bishop f1, threatening that my g2 pawn, I had to move it. g3. He's right now in desperate needs of trying to find a pawn. He went back. He had knight d4 check, winning my f3 pawn, but he didn't see it. Now I was able to take his pawn. I was a pawn up, and The problem here that I had though was that my knight was trapped. So if he just goes back and forth, there's nothing I can do apart from taking the draw. And I ended up drawing International Master Wojtek Soczewski.
Yeah, with this time.
Can you take this pawn? But maybe, okay, then I take here, right? When you went here, you had
okay,
check, I think, and you can
forgot.
take... Yeah.
Now this was huge for me because I felt like there was no point during the game where I had been worse. It felt like I had just played at his level, which, because he's so much better than me and has such a higher title, was really, really, really fun for me. I was so happy after this game, which you can probably see on my face.
I thought that you would lose on time, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. No, when you had your king and my 3 pieces there, my pieces were so uncoordinated. They were so bad. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the game. Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
We drew. I'm shaking. I'm shaking. I'm literally shaking.